Welcome back to edition number 7 of the FODcast. We are back once again to provide our listeners with cutting edge insights into the future of digital commerce tech from the biggest leaders operating in the space at this very moment. Every 2 weeks, we are continuing to bring you interviews with people who are dominating, innovating, or even both within the digital commerce sector. And as always, we are incredibly grateful that these people have given up their time to tell you their story and provide you with insights that give you all a glimpse of the future of digital commerce. Over the course of the year, we're bringing you people from every arena within digital commerce, the retailers, system integrators, software vendors, and full service digital agencies. Today, our insights are going to come from the platform vendor side of the fence. Joining us for this episode, we have Kelly Goetsch. Have I got that right? Pronunciation right?
Goetsch, close enough.
So close, so close. Kelly is currently the Chief Product Officer for Commercetools, globally responsible for product, including strategy, design, and integrations. Not only is Kelly CPO for Commercetools, he also manages to find the time to co-found the MACH Alliance, a fast-growing group of like-minded companies and individuals advocating for open and best-of-breed enterprise tech. And if that wasn't enough, Kelly also hosts his own podcast on commerce thought leadership and is an author too. So a long list of accolades. I'd imagine that keeps you a very busy man.
Yes, it sure does. I feel like most days, if I can keep on top of my scheduled meetings in my inbox, I'm in good shape. So yeah, it can be a little frustrating not actually doing a whole lot on a daily basis.
Not surprised. That is a lot going on. So that is my attempted introduction. Hopefully I did you justice. It would be good for you to give us a brief intro to yourself too.
Sure. Well, I actually started my career back with ATG, which was the leading commerce platform back in the 90s and 2000s, and was later acquired by Oracle, which is now Oracle Commerce. And I spent 5.5 years there. And back then, I really, truly loved commerce and that whole concept of a monolithic platform. ATG was a beautiful architecture, but according to today's standard, it's also quite dated and it doesn't scale very well as digital businesses grow. So I went after 5.5 years of ATG, including 2.5 at Walmart. I went over to Oracle to lead product management for a couple of their cloud products. So one was Exalogic, Java Cloud Service I worked on, Application Container Cloud. And this is back in the day when Oracle actually thought it had a shot at cloud. Sorry, does that sound mean?
It's fair. It's fair.
It was back when was reasonably cool, if it ever was cool, to actually work for Oracle in their cloud group. Not the butt end of a joke like it is today. Anyway, yeah, by the way, I'm never going to go back to Oracle, am I?
No.
Certainly not now.
Not anymore. And it was great. I really learned a lot there at Oracle. And it's a good way to learn how to run a software business at scale. And I worked with some fantastic people there. I didn't particularly like the culture, the business model there, but it was great to learn and network with people, and that was fantastic. And my last year there, I was in charge of microservices, and at that point, I had already written e-commerce in the cloud for O'Reilly, and that was how to fuse commerce with cloud, because cloud was just becoming a thing in the late 2000s. And then after that, I was introduced to microservices and led that initiative for a year there. And I really loved microservices. Microservices intuitively made a lot of sense to me. And I started to see some of the large retailers out there at that point just starting to adopt microservices. So Walmart had just started that for Walmart.com. Amazon had been microservices based for quite a while. And I was kind of looking for something new. I'd been at Oracle for 5 years at that point. And I found Commercetools, which at the time was a pretty small German company. It had just pivoted from services to a platform business, launched the platform in 2013. And I started talking to them in late 2015. And at the time, there were some smaller German customers, but it really hadn't broken out. It was still a pretty small organization at that point. And now we're at 300 plus employees. We have 11 offices around the world. We've been named a leader in Gartner and Forrester and IDC. I think we're actually the fastest commerce platform ever to have been named a leader in Gartner Magic Quadrant, which we're excited about. Yeah, and we've got a big list of customers. We do all the e-commerce for Lego.com and AT&T.com and Burberry.com and Ulta Beauty. These are all multi-billion-dollar a year organizations. In the UK, we do John Lewis, for example, Wiggle. So quite a few good big brand name customers, and we power all of their e-commerce. And then at Commercetools specifically, I'm responsible for, it depends on the day. Broadly, it's my job to make sure that we're building the right product for the right market at the right time. So questions that I pose to my team are, should we be investing in B2B this year? If so, how much? How much should we be investing in our search offering? Should we be spending our time with Google or AWS or both? And what % do we spend our time with each? How much budget do we have for the year? Those are all more of the things that I'm working on. I'm more managing up and out to the rest of the outside world. And then I have a really strong team I work with internally who are much more execution focused and much more internally focused. So I'm all over the place on any given day.
No, I can imagine. And we will come on to Commercetools shortly, and I'm sure we'll spend a large chunk of the conversation today talking about Commercetools and the MACH Alliance. But just interested in going back to Art Technology Group, obviously ATG, pretty much where it started for you. I saw you had a short stint at Foot Locker as a front-end professional beforehand, but at that time, I guess they were a real innovator in the commerce space as well. That's around about the time I actually moved into the recruitment industry, and ATG was the platform. A lot of the tier 1 retailers across the UK and Europe are on the platform. So what was it like for you having what I am assuming is your first real serious commerce job within a company like ATG, which at the time was a thought leader, fast growth, and obviously later on went to get acquired by Oracle?
Well, you have to realize so to go back really far, in high school, I built websites for a lot of law firms and small businesses in my hometown. I live in a fairly small town in Wisconsin. And it just so happens that Wausau was the home place of East Bay. East Bay was the cataloger that Foot Locker bought. And as part of that, back in the 90s and 2000s, they renamed East Bay to footlocker.com. And originally the thought was this location in Wausau, which is admittedly in the middle of nowhere with no technology pool around, would be the digital hub of all of Foot Locker, hence the name footlocker.com. So after my first year of university here, I was looking for a summer job, something tech related. And I responded to an ad. They were looking for someone to take Photoshop wireframes and convert them to HTML. So I just turned 19 and I was hired for like $10 an hour to turn Photoshop into HTML. And it just so happens the chief architect for ATG at the time, Guy Morizane, he was just at the very tail end of his career. And for whatever reason, we really hit it off, and he was a great mentor to me. And he kind of saw to it that I was trained and plugged into the community and given what I needed and progressively challenged to succeed. So I was just great to have the right mentor at the right place at the right time. And back then it was really amazing because ATG was the platform back then. That was the big deal. So I loved it. It was a fantastic space, and I'm always grateful for my early introduction into this world, because if I'd gone the traditional route of graduating and then taking a couple small jobs and then getting a job, I would have been 5-6 years out. And I ultimately did finish my undergraduate and then graduate degrees while working for ATG. But yeah, just it was right time, right place, right everything, and it kind of ended up working out.
So you've got a history of juggling multiple things at once then. So you're doing your undergrad, your postgrad, and your undergrad whilst learning on the job effectively.
Yeah, and I very thoroughly love my job, but when I get older, I very much am looking forward to fishing and doing that during my days. That's what I want to do. Single task.
Very different.
The only multitasking will be figuring out which hand I'm going to reel it and which one I'm going to use to have a cold beer on a nice warm afternoon with. That's the only multitasking I plan to do in the second half of my life.
That sounds okay to me. Question for you. One of the themes you're talking about, Commercetools and some of the clients for Commercetools. You've got Burberry, you've got JL, John Lewis in the UK. And I think, if I'm correct, they were previously ATG, those two. Is that a theme? Do you often go and move clients off of old school ATG tech onto a Commercetools platform because of your knowledge of both, or depth of knowledge of both?
Well, we've done 17 of those migrations to date, which is pretty reasonable. And have you ever read the book Crossing the Chasm by chance?
I have not, no.
It's a great book, but they talk about how technology is adopted according to a bell curve. And in the front third of that bell curve, there's a chasm. It's a gap, basically. And that gap is between the early adopters who will use your product simply because it's cool and new.
Yeah.
And the majority of the market who uses your product because it solves a very specific business need for them. And a lot of companies go and die in that chasm, between that gap. They end up dying somehow, and they can't quite jump it. And in the book, what they advocate for is finding a very, very specific niche and going hard after that niche. Okay. And crossing it by creating a small bridge, right? And then you build momentum and you go forward. We did that with ATG. It was largely with ATG. And part of it's just because I know that ecosystem, but a bigger part of it is because ATG customers Oracle gave up on commerce a long time ago. They had made this foray into commerce, cloud commerce with Oracle Commerce Cloud, which was basically like a hosted small version of ATG, but for the SMB market. And they were trying to go after like Shopify, Magento. And that led all of their big enterprise customers with nowhere to go and nothing to do, because this new product, which never went anywhere, was very focused on customers who are not like them. So you have all these big Oracle ATG customers. ATG is hitting end of life next year, and there's a very compelling reason to make a change. And then the technology itself just hasn't kept up with pace. It's a monolithic application. You have to host it yourself, or you have to pay someone to host it for you. It uses a big, heavy relational database, uses a full heavyweight application server. Like, for a lot of reasons, it's just not at all aligned with the times. So, and then on top of that, you have a lot of competition from Amazon and these digitally native vertical brands who are releasing to production once every second. And a typical ATG customer is releasing to production once a month, to put that in perspective. So for all those reasons, that was a very, very specific niche that we wanted to go after.
Yeah.
Because they were suffering the most, and they had a clear reason to, because of the end of life of the ATG product. So we built a lot of content around there, and then we hired some folks who had worked with ATG in the past to help folks go through the migration, and really made that kind of our bridge to go across. And once we had one ATG customer, then we had two, and then, now we have two live and successful. And then all of a sudden that makes it really easy for the third and the fourth and the fifth. And like I said, we're at something like 17 now and counting.
Okay. So just going back to the crossing the chasm and that bell curve, because I was going to ask you about this anyway, but in that middle third of the bell curve, that's where the commoditization of platforms is happening or has happened. And that is where you see those platform providers then getting caught out, because that commoditization means they're easily accessible. The costs are roughly there or thereabouts coming down. Is that part of the problem?
Well, like with any new technology, At first, it's adopted by very specific customers who are feeling an acute problem. And almost by definition, if it's brand new, it's not commoditized at that point, right? Because there isn't a lot of competition on the market. There are just a couple of vendors. It's a very specialized product. I mean, it would be the equivalent of like, electricity before it was standardized, right? Very, very, very specific niche use cases there. Or it would be the equivalent of the internet back in the 80s. There was no such thing as HTTP and TCP and all those protocols that we now take for granted, right? So that's what you usually see is anything, that starts out, it's by definition not commoditized. But as more and more folks start to use a product, and in this case, commerce platforms, right? We've had commerce platforms on the market since the mid 90s. So, we're coming up on what, 26 years, something like that, of commerce platforms being in existence. What happens is people understand what is necessary, what functions and features are necessary. And that leads to more folks getting in the market. That leads to standardization of features across vendors. It leads to more being invested in the products, more customers coming on board, and the install base of those products expanding. And just generally, it leads to this virtuous cycle, almost a flywheel of commoditization. And we've seen this across the board. We saw it with hardware. You used to have to get these specialized Sun Spark boxes. We saw it with networking equipment. Back in the Novell days, for example, it was very specialized, very 90s technology. Now networking is just something it's commoditized. It's all software based. It's all commoditized. We see it with CPUs. You don't really see, you remember the whole Intel Inside campaign, back in the 2000s and 90s, how big of a deal it was to have an Intel processor. And now nobody cares what processor you have.
Yeah.
We saw it with load balancers, databases, and now, commerce platforms are hitting that age and that maturity in the market where I do think that they are maturing and they're being commoditized as they mature. And I think that's ultimately a good thing, right? I think commoditization is good if you're one of the few vendors that end up on the winning end of that commoditization. And we clearly are.
I believe you discussed this in quite a lot of detail in a post on one of your either personal or Commercetools related blogs. A lot of what you were saying, I've read recently.
Yeah, exactly. And in detail, I went through that commoditization cycle and laid out the case for why commerce is becoming commoditized. But again, I think it's a fantastic thing. I think commoditization is good for all involved, as long as you're one of the few vendors that end up winning there. And I think we are, so we're fine.
And you also, I think near the end of that article, talked about the slow death of legacy platforms. And we've talked about Oracle, and we know your views on Oracle. But do you not think that some of the bigger vendors, SAP, IBM, will be able to adapt and change quick enough to still be relevant in this new shaped digital commerce market?
No.
But still, no chance of them implementing enough change to catch up effectively.
Never. And I'm a student of software companies. Like, that is what I do professionally, is I observe, and I'm part of this market. And look, they've tried it before. So Oracle tried it with Commerce Cloud. That failed. IBM WebSphere Commerce tried to reinvent that product. They failed, sold it off to HCL. Hybris built Yaz, which is Hybris as a service. And that was a phenomenal product. But again, for the same reasons, it died for commercial reasons. So they've tried that. That didn't work. Fundamentally, companies cannot and will not replace the product that is making them money. And the reason is all right, let's pretend you're SAP. Okay. SAP probably has somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 installs of Hybris worldwide, right? Mm-hmm. Those 2,000 Hybris customers are paying 22% support and maintenance every year on a contract. Mm-hmm. Hybris is hard to install. and all commerce platforms are, almost by their definition, they're kind of sticky products. And they want that revenue stream, right? That revenue stream is part of SAP's earnings. That revenue stream is expected to produce returns for years and years and years. It's an annuity, basically, right? And they expect that to be there. And if you build a second completely new product, let's say you build Yaz, which is what they did, you now then have to go to all of those 2,000 other customers and try to sell them on a brand new product. And first, that's very, very, very expensive, right? The cost of sale for software at the enterprise space is ridiculously high. It could easily be, if it costs $200,000 a year for the software, it could easily cost $200,000 to sell that one time. So you're foregoing, if you win the deal, which is not a foregone conclusion, if you win the deal, you're foregoing the first year of revenue there. But the second and worse issue for them is, let's say you go to your 2,000 existing customers and say, hey, there's something new here, you should migrate over to this. There are commercial issues that will, in most cases, get the customer to look at and buy a competing product instead. So why should they go with Hybris Yaz, which is a brand new product, doesn't have a lot of reference customers, and is built by SAP? Why would you do that when you could go with Commercetools, which is a much more, this is the platform we built, right? We built this platform for this reason. Why wouldn't you go with the market leader, the people who actually invented the very thing that you're trying to do? So in many cases, a chunk of those 2,000 customers are going to go straight to Commercetools, or they're going to go to some other competing platform that does that thing better. And you're losing all of that maintenance revenue. You're losing that 22% maintenance revenue on a 2,000 customer install base. That's a lot of money. And then on top of that, you still have to maintain the legacy platform. And the costs to maintain a platform are the same, whether you have one customer or whether you have 2,000 customers on that platform. That's roughly a fixed cost to maintain that legacy platform. So for all those reasons, it's primarily a commercial thing. You can't just go and sell a brand new platform. Look at Magento 1 versus Magento 2, right? Very, very few small percentage of people have adopted Magento 2. And it's because they don't want to disrupt that install base. And people don't like to move unless they really, really have to. And if they do move, they're probably going to go to Shopify or BigCommerce or some other platform at that end of the market that does that thing better.
Yeah. So, sorry, James. I was going to say, so let's say you find yourself in the position of Chief Product Officer for SAP Hybris. What would you be doing then at this point?
It depends what I'm tasked with, right? If the charter is continue to keep as many customers as you can for as long as you can, I would do incremental innovation around the edge of Hybris, which is what they've been doing, right? And the goal there is just to delay the time that somebody switches.
Delaying the inevitable.
That's all it is. Yeah. It's delaying the inevitable. But if I were given the chart, and this is all hypothetical, I would never in a million years join SAP. And I wouldn't especially do that with a product like that. I like smaller, faster growing companies, and I think I would get snuffed out pretty hard in an SAP type environment. I just would not work very well for me. Anyway, if I were given full charter, I would build Yaz or take that off the shelf, but it would only be with the understanding that from a commercial standpoint, this is the product that will be sold new going forward. Okay. Right? And make that a hard requirement. We are not selling Hybris anymore. That is a done product. People on legacy, they can stay on it as long as they want, but all new sales henceforth will be on this new product. Okay. Right? And make a clean path, and you can't really do a migration path, but make it easy, lots of white papers, train up the SI community, how to make that change. I would do all of those things, but you still have the fundamental issue of you not wanting to upset your existing customers and existing install base. And that's just hard to do. It's a very tough charter.
Yeah, and whenever you're a company of SAP size, it's almost mission impossible, right? But like you said, they are making changes, and they seem to be moving to a more Mac approach with Commerce Cloud in particular. Obviously, they've adopted the Spartacus headless front end. It seems like some of the areas of SAP are going to microservices architecture. So they do seem to be making those changes, albeit at a slightly slower rate than companies like Commercetools and others.
Well, but that's the thing. You can't fundamentally alter the product, because if you go in and you try to take Hybris is definitively not microservices in any way, shape, or form. It's a hosted monolithic application. And look, it's a beautiful application, for 2005, right? It is. It's well done. But you have, again, let's call it 2,000 customers. They have their Hybris implementations, and they have tons and tons and tons of code, right? Collectively, they probably have a couple 100 million lines of code written around Hybris, and they expect that code to work the same way. They don't want to go through these gigantic non-functional releases. And if you start fundamentally changing the product, you're going to force your customers to re-implement Hybris. If the changes are so big, they're going to have to re-implement the product entirely. And again, that's another triggering event. If they say, look, if this Hybris upgrade is going to cost us $4 million to do because Hybris has changed their architecture, why should I stay with that product? I'm going to look at what else is on the market right now. And chances are they're going to pick a different platform. So what they're doing is they built the Spartacus front end, and I've heard good things about it. It sounds like a great product, but again, that's an easy thing to do, right? Because you're not touching the core product. Salesforce did this with Mobify, right? They bought Mobify as the head to their headless, or to their newly headless-ish platform, if that makes sense. That's around the edges, that's peripheral innovation, but that's not touching the core of Hybris in any way, shape, or form. They're not changing it. What they're doing is they're marketing microservices, they're marketing all of this stuff, and then they're adding things on the outside, but that's not changing the problem or helping solve the actual fundamental issues of the product.
Okay. Yeah, it's like you said, when the product is set in a certain way, you're never going to change the actual product itself. I think let's bring us on to the MACH Alliance, because obviously the MACH Alliance is obviously you're the chairman. I believe Sonia's the vice president as well. So I'm connected with both of you guys on LinkedIn, and to be honest, I see content pushed by you guys pretty much every single day. The community has grown enormously over the last sort of 12 to 15 months. So I'm interested to understand kind of, I guess, how the MACH Alliance was formed initially, but also where did the idea come from? Because I imagine it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, so we at Commercetools invented the term MACH back in 2018. I think it was spring of 2018. And it really crystallized this new style of architecture that we are championing. So microservices, APIs, cloud native, multi-tenant SaaS, and headless, MACH. And it was a good term. And we started to see partners using it. We used it in some of our marketing campaigns, and it really caught on. And then it was funny, we actually had developers applying to join Commercetools who claimed to be MACH certified developers, which I don't know how that works, but we thought, well, we're probably onto something here. And then we got together with some friends of ours at Content Stack and Ampliance and EPAM and Vaultec. And we thought, let's each chip in 100,000 and let's see if we can make an independent nonprofit. So I registered, it's actually in the US, it's known as a business league. And it's an organization it's a non-stock corporation, it's nonprofit, it's not taxed, and basically members of the organization are all advocating for a specific cause. Right. So I live in Wisconsin. We have a lot of dairy farming here. There's a dairy farmers business league, and they run advertisements talking about the benefits of milk over almond milk, right? That's what the organization is. It's an issue advocacy organization, basically. And we thought, you know what, it's great that we at Commercetools and we at EPAM and, you know, that respective organizations are promoting and championing MACH. That's cool. But coming from a vendor, it doesn't pay that much to do, right? Because it's seen as vendor marketing. So we got together and we thought, let's make an independent group and let's start to actually certify members as being MACH compliant or not. And that was another issue we saw is we had SAP claim to be MACH certified, and we had Adobe Magento claim to be MACH certified, and they weren't. They just weren't, right? It's a simple fact. These are old school applications. They're single tenant, monolithic, hosted applications. And then they're claiming to be microservices and API first, which by definition, they're not API first. Cloud native multi-tenant SaaS, which they're not, and headless, which they're not.
So did you just see them advertising the fact they were, or did they reach out to you guys as the MACH Alliance and say, our platform is MACH, are you okay to certify us? How did it work?
Well, before we formed the alliance, part of the reason we formed the alliance was because there was a lot of misleading marketing out there, vendors claiming to be MACH when they're not. And when you have a CMO, for example, who's trying to decide, hey, what commerce platform do I want? And you have vendor A, B, and C all telling you that they're MACH based, and only one actually is, they don't know. You know, that becomes a he said, she said discussion, right? So we thought, let's do two things with the alliance. Let's educate the market and create demand for MACH outside of any single vendor. And then let's certify organizations as being MACH based or not MACH based. And it's actually great from a competitive standpoint, because now when we go into an opportunity and someone's claiming to be MACH, you can ask them, and we do ask our competitors in competitive deals, then why are you not MACH certified? And in many cases, it's because they applied, but they were rejected for various reasons. You know, maybe they're not actually microservices based, right? And there's some organizations who are definitively not microservices based. You know, maybe they're not multi-tenant, but they're actually single tenant, right? Those are all factors that weigh in on MACH certification. And those are things that are very, very, very important. So it's a good way to educate the market. And we now have 33 members. We have an operating budget of about $1 million. So it's a good way to educate the market. And we do so through white papers and events and webinars with luminaries, and we target anywhere from developers to CFOs on our education. So we're putting a lot of good content out there. And then on top of that, we're acting as a certification body to ensure that vendors that are part of the alliance are actually MACH based, MACH certified. And then the vendors use that in their marketing and their competitive deals, where they say, hey, we're members of the MACH Alliance. This is what MACH means. You need a MACH-based product, and we are a MACH-based product.
Yeah, the marketing campaign is definitely great. Like I said, it's something I see daily, pushed through various social channels. Obviously, you've got the podcasts, you've got numerous white papers, personal blogs, etc. So it's definitely doing the right thing. And actually, you touched on a really good point right at the start of that, and that was the confusion in the industry. Everybody says they do a certain something. That something often changes based on current trends, and something that's been discussed previously is the understanding within a business of what they're doing and why they're doing it, and actually what they need to do. Often companies want to just go and implement a new platform or new technology just to be in with the cool times and get something new, and actually they may not need to spend half as much money or do something half as flashy. So I guess having that credible source of information obviously really benefits the businesses within the MACH Alliance as well.
Right, exactly.
Moving forward then with the MACH Alliance, then what is next for you guys over the next 12 months?
Well, we've got some pretty exciting things that we'll be announcing soon, probably within the next month or two. But the MACH Alliance is growing. We should easily be at 50 members by the end of the year. And we'd like to make it much more of a democracy. Right now, it's a little bit, founder managed at this point. It's a managed democracy, for lack of a better term. And we'd like to really open it up, and we'll be announcing some pretty big initiatives there soon, which is exciting. And then, it's my goal ultimately, once MACH is the standard out there, and I think it's pretty close to being the standard, but when it's undeniably the standard out there, I'd like for the Alliance to change its focus a little bit and become more of a community as opposed to an issue advocacy organization. Because right now, the whole purpose of the Alliance is to push MACH as the standard and make people aware of it. Still, a lot of people don't even know what that is. They've never even heard of it. But it's to educate and push and lobby and make MACH a thing out there. Once it's a thing, and it's the standard and it's unequivocally this default, give that another 18 months to 24 months, then I'd like for the Alliance to turn into more of a community where folks who have done or are going through this type of transformation can come together and network. And we do some of that today, but we're going to go from advocating for a specific point to now being diminished, if that makes, or not even diminished, not advocating and more serving as a networking organization, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it certainly does. I guess host a variety of events. I don't know if you guys have been able to host many virtual events over the last 12 months or not, given everything that's happened.
Yeah, very big events, virtually, and then we'll be doing physical in-person events here shortly.
So obviously the MACH Alliance and everything you've talked us about that underpins that's going to, from your point of view, dramatically shape the future of digital commerce tech. What else, from your perspective, is going to have a really big impact over the next 12 months on that space?
I think a lot of it's just time. We have the technology in place now. We have awareness in the market. People know that they need this style of platform. At the same time, the legacy incumbents are quickly dying off. So IBM sold off WebSphere Commerce to HCL, and that's a dead product. Scava died 2 years ago. ATG, Oracle Commerce, is dead. Hybris is on the decline. That original founding team is all since left. And there's not a lot of, strong leadership there anymore, or thought leadership of any sort there. And then even Salesforce is on the decline too. We've been winning against them in the vast majority of our deals, and they've had kind of a brain drain there as well. And look, that's what happens. Ultimately, when these platforms get acquired, they get absorbed into bigger companies. The really creative, passionate founding team goes away, and they're off to their next thing, or sitting on their islands, or whatever it is that they do. And then you've got the caretaker crew that comes in and basically is trying to extend the life of that asset as long as possible. And that, I understand, that's how the game works. That's how the business works. But that's where our competitors are in right now. So right now, it's just doing what we're doing and not screwing it up. And I think we're in a pretty good spot.
It's a new age, really. How much of that has been a byproduct of COVID? You were clearly, with the setup date of the MACH Alliance, ahead of the impact of COVID, but how much has this fast forwarded things for you?
At least a year. It's certainly accelerated the decision making by some of our customers, which is good. It's also expanded the pool of available customers. It wasn't that long ago that commerce platforms were almost entirely sold directly to retailers. And that was about the extent of the market, was the retailers. And they would all go competing after those mall brands that we all, know. But now commerce platforms are being sold across the board. Insurance companies are buying, like health insurance companies, so that they're selling things, hospitals and hospital chains are buying them to sell goods. Mm-hmm. You have automotive companies buying them to make the car smarter and enable and disable features. A lot of media companies are buying them. A lot of different startups are buying them for various reasons. You have direct-to-consumer brands now and these digitally native vertical brands. So you have all sorts of folks buying commerce platforms that never used to buy them. And COVID has expanded that as people look for new business models in this new economy.
Mm. Outside of the actual commerce platforms, some of the topics that have been raised, two that particularly I wanted to ask you about that have been raised by previous people on the podcast, are the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning within digital commerce, and also the impact of cryptocurrency for retailers and whether they're going to accept payment in crypto. They're two completely different topics, but I'm interested to understand your views on both of those and their impact.
Their current impact or proposed future impact?
Proposed future impact.
I think with artificial intelligence, there are not that many use cases where it makes sense in commerce. And I know I'm supposed to talk and wax poetically about the future being AI based. I don't think it is.
You are absolutely entitled to tell us what you think. That's why we want you on the podcast, to get your understanding. And actually, I don't think the consensus has been that AI is going to have that much of an impact, but it's something that's talked about a lot and well marketed. But I think you're probably right; it's not going to have as much of an impact as we are anticipating.
Yeah, and it gets marketed for sure. And when you hear other interviews, I think a lot of people will say everything is going to be AI based and the whole world's going to be. I don't think it is. And look, we have a really good machine learning team. But what they do is they make existing functions smarter. And I'll give you an example of a machine learning feature that we have. A big issue with digital commerce is the miscategorization of products. And what that is, like a pair of shoes, for example, right? Like let's say they're casual shoes, but they're also running shoes. In many cases, they'll be in the standard shoes category, but they should also be in the running shoes category. Mm-hmm. Right. So we have IP that goes and looks at the shoes and looks at its attributes and makes recommendations to the merchants that says, hey, you should probably think about adding it to this category as well. Those are the types of things that are good for machine learning. But I would even argue that that's not even real machine learning. That's just use of intelligent algorithms. Like there's nothing terribly transformational about it. Mm. So I don't think it has terribly high impact or implications for the commerce space. I think commerce is commoditized and it's becoming more so. And I don't think that's bad. And I don't think that features need to be a whole lot smarter, to be honest. I think where we're going is a more composable world where you can have smaller point vendors that do specific things really, really well. And you have us as the standard commerce platform. We offer a big library of 300 individually consumable APIs. And then you can supplement that with your other APIs, other things that you happen to have needs for. So maybe you need a loyalty program, so you build your own loyalty APIs. Or maybe you need a really, really amazing promotion engine, and then you build your own promotion, or you build your own APIs, or you buy something like Talon One, for example, a really good standalone promotion vendor. That's more where we're going. It's not, commerce is such a well-known space. It's, the requirements basically haven't changed since the mid 90s. It's, I want to browse for products. I want to buy stuff. I want to log into my account. Like, it's not that hard. It's really not. The architecture is completely changed. But what do I want to do as an end shopper? That's all basically the exact same. And it probably will be for a very, very, very long time.
One of the questions we'll ask you later is what is the single biggest thing that's going to impact digital commerce in the next 12 months? Before we ask you that, one of our recent guests said cryptocurrency. Retailers are going to have to start adopting acceptance of cryptocurrency. Now, I'm not sure on this, but I'm certainly interested to understand what your view is on cryptocurrency within the remit of digital commerce platforms, the retailers' adoption of the currency, and how that might impact what they're trying to achieve.
I think cryptocurrency is still gambling. I don't see it. I see in the future, 10 plus years out, I think it could be pretty big.
Yeah.
But right now, I mean, it's such a small niche. If I look at all the people I know personally, and I'm friends and acquaintances with a lot of very tech focused people. It's still only 2 or 3 people I know who have ever done anything with cryptocurrency at all. It's not common. And the retailers out there, they're selling to the mass market. They're selling to people who still have flip phones. Right?
Yeah.
So to ask them to start, to pick a cryptocurrency and then start buying stuff using that cryptocurrency when debit cards and credit cards work just fine and have worked fine for decades, there's no compelling value there. And I don't think cryptocurrency has crossed the chasm yet into the mainstream by any means. We've seen a few retailers that support it, but who is getting cryptocurrency besides, I mean, honestly, between scammers and 18-year-olds shut in their parents' houses in the basements, like I would never pay the kid who mows my lawn with cryptocurrency. Like if I buy something for my in-laws on Amazon and they need to pay me back, they give me cash. Like my father-in-law, who's 66, would never in a million years think of giving. He doesn't even know what cryptocurrency is. He can barely send a text message. So for retailers to now start supporting cryptocurrency when there clearly is not even a winner by any means yet, which one is going to win? And then for retailers to start supporting that, especially with all the crazy price fluctuations, and on top of that, the environmental concerns. I mean, I don't think so. I don't. We support it at Commercetools. So we support, I think we're to 36 digits of price precision, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
So you can support it on our platform, but whatever PSP you want to use, we don't particularly care. I mean, you could be trading gold coins for all we care. We'll capture the price and we'll, calculate the order total, but whatever PSP you want to use, that's up to you. And, as a customer, that's up to you and whatever vendor you choose to accept payments. We could care less.
Okay. Save the conversation with the older generation around the digital wallet for another time, then I guess.
My mother-in-law, smart college educated woman, she sends me emails on a weekly basis that are phishing attempts for her PayPal password, and she thinks they're legitimate. And they're clearly, blatantly scams. I mean, just you look at it and I want to hit her sometime. It sounds horrible, but I want to be like, how you are a smart grown-ass woman. How are you falling for this?
Yeah.
And people who talk about cryptocurrency as becoming this big standard, they are not living in the real world. The real world is filled with people who love cash and maybe use a credit card. And for them to start using crypto is 10 levels beyond what the vast majority of the population today could even conceive of.
So in short, then, we don't see it as being much of a disruption over the next few years then, Kelly, right?
I don't. No, not one bit. I don't. I think 10 years out, maybe, maybe once there's a clear winner, maybe if there's instability with, some of the major US or the major world financial systems, if the US starts to have more political instability and the dollar isn't seen as a, very safe bet, or there's, big breakup in the EU and, the euro isn't seen as a viable currency, or, like if there are really large political instabilities that impact the major currencies, and maybe we start to see a parallel currency take over, but again, there you have the issue of there's just so many, there's Dogecoin, there's, Ethereum, like there are 1,000 currencies out there, and there still has to be some consolidation there.
Yeah, well, there's far too volatile for the time being anyway. I mean, it shifts like up to 40-50% on a day on a regular basis. So yeah, I would agree with a lot of what you said. I do believe in the technology. I've recently been looking into it quite a lot, so given how prominent it is in the market these days, but I don't see any mass adoption for some time. As like you said, is a completely different learning curve in itself. There's so many. There's also new cryptos being created on a daily basis, and there's going to have to be some kind of just general adaptation of a specific type of coin across the certain industries to actually make it work.
Yeah, we're just, again, the tech literacy out there, it's just non-existent. We still have a lot of time and consolidation left, and we're years away. And my brother-in-law keeps asking when is a good time to invest in crypto, and right now it is gambling. That's what it is. It is a gamble. It is no better or no worse than going to a casino.
Yeah, no,
and playing the table at this point. And that's fine. Look, if you have some play money and you want to have some fun with it, that's cool. But I just, I'm encouraging people to not look at it as investing instead of looking at it as gambling, for better or worse. That's kind of what it is at this point.
Yeah, I'm certainly, I think on your side with that. So moving on to the final three questions we like to ask everyone, where we try and really dig down on what you think the future is going to look like. And you've clearly given us your depth of knowledge in that space. So for me, the first question is really pertinent. And what do you think the single biggest challenge for retailers is going to be post-pandemic over the course of the next 12 to 18 months?
I think it's mostly on the logistics side.
Okay.
I think on the experience side, retailers are pretty good these days. And maybe they're a little bit, the front ends are a little bit too basic and commoditized. I could make a good argument for that. But I think from an experience standpoint, it's fine. I think where Amazon and others have folks beat is on the logistics side. If I go to any retailer in the US that's not Amazon, I'm looking at 5-6+ business days. If I look at Amazon, I get next day. And there's a ton of value for me as a consumer to do next day. I think that's where there needs to be innovation around fulfillment centers, around robotic picking of packages, figure out the last mile delivery. And, I don't think that, delivering stuff through Uber or those other high cost methods is very appropriate, but I think that's where they've got to figure this out. If I look at the OMS software, that stuff is all from the 90s. It's super glued and duct taped together at best.
So is that your experience in the US then? Because maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I would have said the same thing for us in the UK, but a lot of retailers have got their act together on the logistics side, and therefore presenting a better customer experience for us. Not same day delivery for hardly anyone, but next day delivery is not unheard of, and returns are getting much better from a consumer perspective. So in the UK, I don't think that far off.
And that works for you in the UK market because it's a relatively small, dense country, but in the US, it's very sparsely populated, very large geographic area, and delivery here is just terrible, which is why Shopify is investing billions of dollars in their delivery network, their last mile delivery network, because right now it's not where it needs to be, And then within Europe, there's still issues getting things across borders and whatnot. I know if you're buying from a UK retailer, it's pretty straightforward. But again, if you're buying something from Spain and having it shipped to the UK, that can take some time for sure.
Yeah, that's a massive difference. And then there's the return. I've had direct experience of that. The return costing me about the same as the product, rendering it useless just to return. So yeah, no, I think it's a fair point.
So the second question we have to tailor slightly because it's specific to the UK high street, which is obviously very different to any American shopping experience. But how do you see retail looking in the next 5 years?
I don't think it's going to look dramatically different. than it does. I hope that delivery is faster and fulfillment's faster. I think we're going to get more experiential with commerce, and that's part of the value of headless commerce. Is now you can have these digital experience platforms, DXPs, that allow marketers to engage directly with their customers.
So what about the
Create that
actual
brand value.
the in-store experience?
I think we're going to start to see more of the commerce platform being used as the point of sale.
Okay.
I'm already seeing that quite a bit across our customers. It doesn't make sense necessarily to have a legacy point of sale system from the 80s powering your store and having it with its own promotion engine and pricing and everything else, and then have a digital commerce platform that serves every other channel. It makes far more sense just to put commerce in the stores and have the same APIs power all of the experiences, regardless of the device or the experience.
I remember that. I remember maybe 10 years ago when I was working in Carphone Warehouse, obviously acquired by Best Buy, and you had different promotions on the computer system, which was from the 1950s, than you would if you went on the iPad and onto the URL, and you'd get two different sets of promotions, and it was so confusing. Customers would come in and say, I want to go for this, and you'd be looking there and it's not there, and you go there and it's not there, and
yep.
Yeah, all of that these days is crazy.
It's a very poor customer experience. It really is.
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
But I'm optimistic though. I think retailers are moving in the right direction. And there's also there's a Darwinism at play as well. And you see the weaker retailers dying off, those that have not invested in technology or customer experiences falling away. And you see a lot of these newer digitally native retailers and digitally native vertical brands. You're seeing the ones that are not making those investments just die. And almost by definition, you're starting to see retail become much more tech centric than it ever was.
Yeah, certainly. And that leads us on nicely to the next and final question. Appreciate it's difficult to pick one particular thing, but if you had to choose just one, what do you think would be the most disruptive piece of technology that's going to impact the digital commerce space in the next 12 months?
I think GraphQL is what I'm the most excited about. And maybe I'm biased. I did write a book on GraphQL not too long ago. And we are co-hosting the world's largest GraphQL conference in September. But we see already at least 50% of our customers using GraphQL from the very beginning of their projects. And it's really creating some, it's allowing our customers to build experiences in different devices in different formats that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to do.
So for those who don't understand or know about GraphQL, just to briefly summarize how it's doing, what it does and how it's doing it.
It is a query language for your APIs. So rather than if you're on the product detail page, today you would call the product API and the inventory API and the pricing API and the add to cart API, right? You'd call those different APIs. With GraphQL, you can issue a single query, almost like SQL, like a SQL query. And you can say, for this product, I would like the display name and the price and the inventory level and the image and, right? And in one query, you will send that to the server. The server then makes calls out to the appropriate APIs. It filters out all the unnecessary data, so it avoids the overfetching issues, the underfetching issues, and it will give you back in a nice JSON response exactly, precisely, only what you requested.
Nice.
And from a client standpoint, it's nice because now you don't have to authenticate against different APIs. You don't have to know how to call the APIs. All you do is you describe the data you want, right? And you can autocomplete using a nice IDE, describe the data and issue a query, and the server will then give you back exactly, precisely, only the data that you want. So I'll give you an example from a business standpoint, how that helps. If you're building a product detail page for an Apple Watch app, right? All you do is just modify the query to only get back the name and the price in a small thumbnail picture. Whereas if you're on desktop, you're going to get back 50 different attributes. And you can alter that very, very quickly and easily by just changing the GraphQL query. That's it.
So you're removing the need or the element for having to worry about mobile optimized sites, because actually you're pulling through the right data and the right information for each, whatever format you're viewing that web page from effectively.
Yeah. And look, Facebook had this exact problem back in 2015 when they were building their brand new mobile apps. They had these website wrappers basically as apps. They were a terrible user experience. They said, we're going to build new native apps. But the problem they have is they have 50 different device platforms to support. They have Apple and Android and, take your pick of phone models around the world and operating systems and platforms. They had to build an experience for each, and they didn't want to have all of that logic in the front end of each. And they didn't want to build a back end for front end layer. So they actually came up with the concept of GraphQL internally.
Okay.
And then they open sourced it. And then we were one of the very first adopters of it at Commercetools. But since then, Twitter has fully adopted it. New York Times has, a lot of Silicon Valley has consolidated around it. And even Shopify, they're no longer claiming to be API first. They're now claiming to be GraphQL first, which is exciting. And we have big customers out in production, like Lego.com is all GraphQL based, for example. People love it. It's a great technology, and it really has big implications for the number of devices that you can support, for the different heads that you can build, the richness of the experience of each of those heads. I mean, there's a lot you can do with GraphQL that otherwise wasn't possible with APIs. And I really think it's APIs plus GraphQL, right? GraphQL is kind of the layer you use to call your APIs.
It makes sense.
That's it. Sorry, go on, James.
I was just going to say, no, it makes sense from how you explained it. I wasn't familiar with it beforehand, but it seems like a no-brainer, to be honest.
It is. And that's why we have so many customers doing it, and we've made some pretty big investments in it. And we're co-hosting that conference in September, GraphQL Conf. So yeah, for all those reasons, it's kind of a good time to be behind GraphQL.
Great. Well, that is certainly a new one for us in terms of answer to that question, but that's why I asked for an overview of it, because again, it's new to me, but certainly the use of it, its need is definitely there. So makes sense. And we should keep our eyes peeled and look out for the conference as well.
Sounds great.
So thank you very much. It's really been informative. I've certainly learned a lot more about the digital commerce world than I knew before we started. So really, really appreciate your time. Some great points and some real good insight in there for us and all the listeners to take away with them. So really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you to everyone listening. We hope today's episode has given you all some insight into the future of digital commerce, and we look forward to bringing episode number 8 to you shortly. Until then.